November 29th, 1864. Dawn. Sand Creek, Colorado Territory. 150 people, mostly women and children, sleeping peacefully under an American flag. 700 soldiers surrounded them, armed with rifles and cannons. Their commander gave the order, "Kill them all, big and small." And when it was over, he got a hero's welcome in Denver. People cheered. They wore the scalps of children on their hats. This is the Sand Creek Massacre. And here's what makes it even worse. The people sleeping under that American flag were promised protection by the same army that butchered them. They were told they'd be safe, that the flag would protect them. It didn't. For years, the government called this a battle, a glorious victory against hostile Indians. It wasn't. It was mass murder, cold-blooded, premeditated, celebrated. And the man who ordered it, he died free, in his bed at age 73, never facing justice. But to understand how this happened, we need to go back 3 months before the massacre, to the moment a Cheyenne peace chief made a decision that would doom his people. Summer 1864. The Colorado Territory was in chaos. Gold had been discovered in the Rocky Mountains in 1858. Thousands of white settlers flooded into the territory. They built Denver. They staked claims. They wanted land, Cheyenne and Arapaho land. The government wanted the tribes gone, moved to reservations, out of the way. But there was a problem. The Cheyenne weren't united. Some chiefs, like Black Kettle, wanted peace. They'd signed treaties. They camped near army forts. They tried to coexist with the white settlers. They believed in diplomacy, in finding a way to share the land. Others, mostly younger warriors, had seen enough broken promises. They wanted to fight back. Raids increased throughout 1864. Settlers were killed. Ranches burned. Wagon trains attacked. Tensions exploded across the territory. Colorado's governor, John Evans, panicked. He declared that all friendly Indians should report to designated camps near army forts for protection. All others would be considered hostile and hunted down. And that's when the government made Black Kettle an offer he thought he couldn't refuse. September 1864. Fort Weld, Denver. Black Kettle, along with other Cheyenne and Arapaho chiefs, met with Governor Evans and the military commander of the Colorado Territory, Colonel John Milton Chivington. They told him, "Bring your people to Sand Creek. It's about 40 miles from Fort Lyon. Camp there, fly the American flag. You'll be under military protection, safe." Black Kettle believed them. He wanted to believe them. He'd spent years advocating for peace. He'd signed the Fort Wise Treaty in 1861, giving up millions of acres of Cheyenne land in exchange for a reservation and government rations. The government broke that treaty almost immediately. The rations never came. The reservation land was terrible, barren and unproductive. But Black Kettle still believed in peace, in coexistence, in the idea that if his people just cooperated, just showed they were friendly, the white man's government would honor its word. So in late September 1864, he led about 700 Cheyenne and Arapaho people to Sand Creek. He camped exactly where the army told him to camp. He flew the American flag over his lodge, and below it, a white flag of truce. Major Edward Wincoop, the commander at Fort Lyon, confirmed the arrangement. He gave his word. The camp was under military protection. Black Kettle could sleep peacefully, and he did, for a while. But Black Kettle didn't know something crucial. While he was being promised safety, Colonel John Chivington was planning something very different. Let me tell you about John Chivington, because understanding him is key to understanding what happened at Sand Creek. Colonel John Milton Chivington, 43 years old, 6'4", built like a bear, Methodist minister. They called him the Fighting Parson. He wasn't a soldier, not really. He was a preacher who wanted to be a war hero. And he had a problem, a big one. The Civil War was ending. Everyone could see it. The Confederacy was collapsing. Chivington commanded the Colorado Volunteers, specifically the 3rd Regiment. They'd been raised in 1864 to fight Confederates to protect Colorado from a possible Southern invasion, but they never saw battle, not once. They spent their time guarding supply routes, escorting wagon trains, garrison duty, boring, inglorious work. They were mocked. Other units called them the Bloodless Third, men who'd signed up for war and glory, but spent their service doing nothing. Their enlistment was ending in just a few weeks. December 1864. And then they'd be disbanded, sent home, forgotten. Chivington needed glory, fast. He had political ambitions. He wanted to run for Congress, maybe governor, but he needed a military victory. Something dramatic, something that would make him a hero, and he knew exactly where to get one. Here's what most people don't know about Chivington. His views on Native Americans weren't just hostile, they were genocidal. His own words, documented multiple times by witnesses. Kill and scalp all Indians, big and small. Nits make lice. Nits. That's what he called children, the eggs of lice. Vermin to be exterminated before they could grow. This wasn't just rhetoric, this was his genuine belief. And in the fall of 1864, while promising Black Kettle safety at Sand Creek, Chivington was already planning the attack. He just needed to wait for the right moment. Meanwhile, at Sand Creek, Black Kettle's people were trying to survive the winter. By late November, there were about 700 people in the camp. Maybe 200 were men of fighting age. The rest were women, children, and elders. They were peaceful. They hunted. They gathered. They traded with nearby ranches. Some of the men even helped the army track down hostile bands who were raiding. Major Wynkoop visited the camp regularly. He confirmed they were peaceful. He sent reports to his superiors. These people are not hostile. They're under our protection. And then, in early November, something strange happened. Major Wynkoop was suddenly removed from command of Fort Lyon. No explanation, no warning, just orders from above. You're done. Go to Fort Riley, Kansas. His replacement arrived immediately, Major Scott Anthony, a Chivington loyalist. The pieces were moving into place. Black Kettle didn't know this. He continued to trust, to believe in the American flag flying over his camp, to tell his people they were safe. He shouldn't have. November 28, 1864. Night. Fort Lyon. Colonel Chivington arrived with 700 men of the 3rd Colorado Cavalry. They'd marched from Denver. They were cold, angry. Many were drunk and they wanted blood. Some of Fort Lyon's officers were horrified when they learned what Chivington planned. Captain Silas Soule, Lieutenant Joseph Kramer. They'd been to Sand Creek. They knew the camp was peaceful, full of women and children, under military protection. They confronted Chivington. "This is murder," they said. "These people are under our protection." Major Wynkoop gave them his word. Chivington didn't care. He threatened them. Any officer who refused to participate would be arrested and court-martialed, maybe hanged for cowardice. He posted guards around Fort Lyon to prevent anyone from slipping away to warn the camp. Then at 8 p.m. on November 28th, he assembled his men and gave them their orders. "We're marching to Sand Creek, 40 miles. We march all night. At dawn, we attack. I want you to kill and scalp all Indians, big and small. Nits make lice, take no prisoners." His men cheered. They marched out into the freezing night. 700 soldiers, 4 howitzer cannons, heading for Sand Creek. They marched through the darkness, through snow and frozen ground. Some men were so drunk they could barely stay on their horses. They reached Sand Creek just before dawn. November 29th, 1864. Chivington positioned his men on the hills overlooking the camp. The 4 howitzer cannons were placed to fire directly into the lodges. He waited for enough light to see clearly. Then he gave the signal. Dawn, November 29th, 1864. In the camp, people were waking up, making fires to warm themselves. The temperature was below freezing. Mothers were preparing breakfast. Children were still sleeping in the lodges. Black Kettle woke up and saw soldiers on the hills above the camp. He didn't panic. He thought they were from Fort Lyon, coming to check on them, maybe bringing rations. He stepped outside his lodge. The American flag was flying above him, the white flag of truce below it. He raised the American flag higher, waved it, called out to his people to stay calm. "Don't run! We're peaceful! We're under protection!" Some of the soldiers hesitated. They could see the flags. They could see these were women and children. But Chivington didn't hesitate. He gave the order. "Attack!" The soldiers charged down the hills, screaming, firing their rifles, not at warriors, at everyone. The howitzer cannons opened fire. Explosive shells tore through the lodges. Canvas and wood splintered. Bodies flew. Black Kettle stood in front of his lodge, the American flag still waving above him. He was shouting in English, "Stop! Stop! We're peaceful! We have a treaty!" Bullets ripped through the flags, through the air around him. Chaos erupted. People scattered in every direction, running, screaming, not understanding what was happening. They'd been told they were safe. They'd been promised protection. Women grabbed children and ran. Old men tried to fight back with whatever they could find. Bows and arrows, knives, sticks, bare hands. The soldiers had rifles, cannons, overwhelming firepower. It wasn't a battle, it was a slaughter. Chief White Antelope, 75 years old, one of the most respected peace chiefs, walked toward the soldiers. His arms crossed over his chest, singing his death song in Cheyenne. The soldiers cut him down in seconds, then they scalped him and cut off his nose and ears as trophies. People ran toward the creek bed. It was the only cover. They thought if they could get below the banks, they'd be protected from the gunfire. They were wrong. The creek bed became a killing ground. Families huddled together. Mothers covered their children with their own bodies. The soldiers fired down into them from above. Point-blank range, and it wasn't just killing. What happened at Sand Creek went far beyond military action. It became something else, something darker. Some soldiers, years later, testified about what they saw. "I saw a woman with both breasts cut off. She was still alive when they did it. I saw a pregnant woman. They cut her open, took her unborn child out, left it lying beside her. I saw soldiers taking scalps from infants, babies who couldn't even walk yet. I saw body parts being taken as trophies, fingers, ears, genitals." This went on for hours. Colonel Chivington rode through the carnage, encouraging his men. "Kill them all. Take scalps. Show no mercy." Some soldiers later claimed they were just following orders, that they didn't know any better, that it was war, but some soldiers refused. Captain Silas Soule and his entire company of men positioned themselves on a hill overlooking the massacre. They did not fire a single shot. They watched in horror. They witnessed everything. They would later testify about what they saw, but most of the soldiers participated eagerly. By noon, the gunfire finally stopped. The soldiers had run out of targets. The creek ran red with blood. Bodies were everywhere, scattered across the sand, piled in the creek bed. Inside burned lodges. Over 150 Cheyenne and Arapaho were dead. 2/3 of them were women and children. The Army's casualties, 9 dead, 38 wounded, most of them from friendly fire in the chaos. Black Kettle survived, somehow. He'd been shot multiple times, but managed to escape into the hills with his wife. She'd been shot 9 times, 9 bullets in her body, but she lived. They both lived, though part of them died that day. That night, November 29th, the soldiers celebrated. They'd taken over 100 scalps, body parts, trophies. Chivington allowed them to keep everything, encouraged it even. They spent the night at Sand Creek, drinking, laughing, posing with their trophies for photographs. The next morning, they marched back toward Fort Lyon and Denver, triumphant. When Colonel Chivington and the 3rd Colorado Cavalry returned to Denver on December 22, 1864, they were greeted as conquering heroes. The entire city turned out to celebrate. Thousands of people lined the streets, cheering, waving flags. Chivington displayed the scalps at the Apollo Theater, over 100 of them. He hung them on the stage during intermission. The crowd went wild. People cheered. They wanted to touch them. Some people took scalps home as souvenirs, wore them on their hats, displayed them in their homes. The Rocky Mountain News ran the headline, "Great Battle with Indians, the Savages Dispersed, the Volunteers Earn Immortal Honor." John Chivington became famous overnight, a hero of the frontier, a man who'd struck a blow against the savage Indians. Politicians praised him, religious leaders praised him. He gave speeches, accepted awards. He was planning to run for Congress. Everything was going perfectly for him, but some people knew the truth, and they weren't staying silent. Captain Silas Soule, the officer who'd refused to participate in the massacre, wrote letters to Major Wincoop, who'd been removed from Fort Lyon, to officials in Washington, to anyone who would listen. He described what he'd witnessed in graphic detail. It was not a battle. It was cold-blooded murder. They killed women who were holding up white flags. They killed children who were begging for mercy. They mutilated bodies. They took trophies from infants. Major Wincoop, furious at what had happened to the peaceful camp he'd promised to protect, forwarded Soule's letters to his superiors in Washington, to Congress, and slowly the truth started to emerge. By early 1865, questions were being asked, in Congress, in the press, in the military. Was Sand Creek really a battle, or was it something else? In March 1865, Congress launched not one, but 3 separate investigations into Sand Creek. A Congressional Joint Committee on the Conduct of the War, a military commission, and an investigation by the Department of the Interior. John Chivington was called to testify. He defended his actions, claimed it was a battle against hostile warriors, that the Cheyenne at Sand Creek were responsible for raids across Colorado, that he'd done his duty. He lied repeatedly, boldly. Captain Silas Soule testified too. He told the truth, all of it, every horrible detail. Other officers from Fort Lyon testified, confirming Soule's account, describing the atrocities. Some of Chivington's own men testified, admitting what they'd done, what they'd seen. The evidence was overwhelming. On April 23, 1865, 1 month after testifying before Congress, Captain Silas Soule was walking down a street in Denver with his wife. It was evening. They were heading home. A man approached from behind, drew a pistol, shot Silas Soule in the back of the head. He died instantly. His killer was Charles Squires, a former soldier in the 2nd Colorado Cavalry, one of Chivington's men. Squires fled Denver. He was never caught, never punished. Silas Soule was 26 years old. He'd refused to participate in a massacre. He'd told the truth, and he was murdered for it. His widow, Hersa, was pregnant. She gave birth to their son a few months later, a son who would never know his father. And here's what happened to John Chivington. The 3 congressional investigations all reached the same conclusion. Sand Creek was not a battle. It was a massacre. The official Joint Committee report used words like foul, dastardly, and a disgrace to civilization. They condemned Chivington's actions, called them murder, war crimes. They recommended he be court-martialed and punished. But there was a problem. Chivington had resigned from the army in January 1865, before the investigations concluded. Once he was a civilian, he couldn't be court-martialed under military law, and civilian authorities never filed criminal charges. The prosecutors in Colorado were political allies. They didn't want to prosecute a local hero, so John Chivington walked free. He never spent a day in jail, never paid a fine, never faced any legal consequences. He moved around for a few years, Ohio, California, back to Colorado. He gave speeches defending Sand Creek, claimed he'd done the right thing, that the investigations were politically motivated lies. Some people believed him, others didn't. But it didn't matter. He died on October 4th, 1894, in Denver, in his own home, in his own bed, age 73. He never expressed remorse, not once, not ever. Some of his soldiers were investigated, a few were questioned, but none were ever convicted of anything. The only person who paid a price was Captain Soule, murdered for telling the truth. And what about Black Kettle, the man who trusted the American flag? You'd think after Sand Creek, after being shot multiple times, after watching his people massacred under a flag of truce, he'd give up on peace. He didn't. Black Kettle survived Sand Creek. He and his wife both recovered from their wounds, and he continued to advocate for peace. He still believed coexistence was possible, that treaties could work. In October 1867, he signed the Medicine Lodge Treaty. The Cheyenne would move to a reservation in Indian Territory, present-day Oklahoma. The government promised rations, supplies, protection. Black Kettle kept his word. He moved his people to the reservation, camped peacefully, and on November 27, 1868, 4 years after Sand Creek, history repeated itself. Washita River, Indian Territory. Dawn, Black Kettle's camp. About 50 lodges, maybe 250 people, peaceful, under military protection again. Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer attacked at dawn. The 7th Cavalry, the same playbook as Chivington. Surprise attack, no warning. Black Kettle and his wife tried to escape on horseback. They were shot in the back, both of them. This time Black Kettle didn't survive. The same man who'd survived Sand Creek, who'd spent years advocating for peace, who'd kept believing that cooperation with the US government was possible, who'd kept trusting in treaties and flags, shot in the back by the same army he'd tried to work with. Custer called the Battle of Washita a great victory, another triumph against hostile Indians. It was another massacre. Women and children killed, lodges burned, ponies slaughtered, and Custer became a hero, just like Chivington. The pattern was clear: attack peaceful camps, kill women and children. Claim it was a battle, get praised. Sand Creek and Washita weren't anomalies, they were policy. Between 1864 and 1890, the US military conducted dozens of similar attacks across the frontier. Women and children killed under flags of truce, peaceful camps destroyed, officers who protested were silenced or removed, officers who participated were promoted and celebrated. And for over a century, Sand Creek was barely mentioned in American textbooks. When it was mentioned at all, it was called a battle. The Army's official name for it was the Battle of Sand Creek, not massacre, battle. It wasn't until the late 20th century that historians and activists, many of them descendants of the Sand Creek survivors, began pushing for the truth to be told, for the name to be changed, for recognition. In 2007, Sand Creek became a National Historic Site, preserved, protected, open to visitors. But even today, 160 years later, something is still missing. The United States government has never formally apologized to the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes for Sand Creek. There's no national memorial in Denver, the city that celebrated the massacre, the city where people wore the scalps of children on their hats. For decades, streets and buildings in Colorado were named after John Chivington. Some of those names have been changed in recent years, but not all. There's no national memorial for Captain Silas Soule, the man who refused to participate and told the truth and was murdered for it. The descendants of the Sand Creek victims are still fighting for full recognition, for justice, for acknowledgement. In 2014, on the 150th anniversary of the massacre, they held a healing ceremony at Sand Creek. Hundreds of people, Cheyenne, Arapaho, others, praying, remembering, honoring the dead. But healing requires acknowledgement, real acknowledgement. And the United States has never fully acknowledged what happened at Sand Creek, what it means, what it represents. Sand Creek is a scar, and scars don't heal without treatment. So what do we learn from Sand Creek? Lesson 1. Dehumanization enables atrocities. When John Chivington called children nits when he compared them to lice eggs, he made it easier for his men to kill them. Once you dehumanize someone, once you strip them of their humanity in your mind, killing them becomes easier. This happens in every genocide, every massacre. The language of dehumanization always comes first. Lesson 2. Silence is complicity. Most of Chivington's 700 soldiers participated in the Sand Creek Massacre. They followed orders. They killed. They took trophies. Only Captain Soule and his company refused, and Soule paid with his life. But his refusal mattered. His testimony mattered. Without him, the truth might never have emerged. Silence in the face of atrocity is a choice, and it's the wrong choice. Lesson 3. Celebrations of violence reveal moral decay. When the people of Denver cheered for scalps, when they wore them as trophies, when they called mass murder a glorious victory, that wasn't just ignorance, that was culture. A society that celebrates violence against the defenseless, that rewards atrocities, that turns killers into heroes, is a society with deep moral rot. Lesson 4. Justice delayed is justice denied. It's been 160 years since Sand Creek. The US government condemned it in 1865, called it a disgrace, but no one was punished. No apology was issued. The wound was never treated. And so it remains open, festering, unhealed. And lesson 5. History is written by the powerful, but the truth always matters. For over a century, Sand Creek was called a battle in official records and textbooks. The powerful tried to control the narrative, but descendants remembered. Historians investigated. The truth emerged. It took time, it took effort, it took courage, but it happened. The truth always matters. Always. November 29th, 1864. Sand Creek, Colorado Territory. 150 people killed. 2/3 of them women and children, sleeping under an American flag, promised safety, betrayed. Their killer became a hero, died free, unpunished. The man who told the truth was murdered in the streets, and the government has never apologized. Black Kettle trusted the American flag twice, and it got him killed. Sand Creek is a reminder that some wounds don't heal on their own. They need treatment, they need acknowledgement, they need justice. Until we face them, they remain open. So here's my question for you. Should the United States formally apologize to the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes for the Sand Creek Massacre? Comment yes or no. And tell me why you think what you think. And if you believe stories like this need to be told, that we can't just bury uncomfortable history, hit that subscribe button. We're not here for the sanitized version. We're here for the truth. Next episode, we're covering the Fetterman Massacre, December 1866. 81 soldiers marched out of Fort Phil Kearny. 0 came back, and the officer who led them ignored every warning he was given. The Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho were waiting, and they were done being massacred. I'll see you there.